welcome to Contemporary Art Podcast with me, Lisa Fevral. And let me tell you, okay, I am filming this for the second time. I have never refilmed anything because of a technical issue before. Because usually I'm pretty good at catching technical issues. I usually check multiple times and I check during the process of recording. But yesterday I was filming and I think it might have been because my projector was hooked up to the same adapter as the mic. Because usually I have a projection at the back when I'm filming podcasts. The projector was malfunctioning a little bit. I think the connection wasn't great. Maybe it was the HDMI cord. Maybe it was some problem with the adapter. I'm not sure. But in any case, the mic just stopped taking in any signal. It just all of a sudden turned off, even though it showed that it was on. And at the end of it all, I was left with really terrible audio because I already have terrible acoustics in my house. Mostly because I live by a really busy road and it is a nightmare to film here. But with this whole situation, I was left with camera sound and it's just not good. I tried to do something in Ableton. I tried to take out the noise, tried to make it a little bit less right ear centric, but it just did not work. So we're here today again, and I dressed in the same outfit as yesterday, and let me just tell you that I posted a TikTok in this look because I thought that it was only gonna reach people who followed me on TikTok, and I just made a TikTok asking why all the filters that have makeup applied to you, why do they all give me like a weird white cast on my eyes? And what do you think? I got a comment, someone asking if I am cosplaying as Wendy. Don't you love that for me? And then after that, my mom also told me that it reminds her of Asterix and Obelix. I don't know if that's what the names are exactly because I've only seen that movie when I was very little and I do not remember a thing from it. But in any case, if you are watching this, you are seeing the look. I like it, okay? In any case, today we are talking about Bridgerton and Rococo art. We're also going to talk about something at the end of this podcast where I'm just going to be asking a couple of questions that will naturally come about when we're going to be talking about period dramas and films that are supposed to be set in 18th century or 19th century. So let me introduce art section to you.
Yeah, she's a full-on Monet. It's like the painting, see? From far away it's okay, but up close it's a big old mess.
Okay, so in season 1 of Bridgerton, there is a painting in Sienna's bedroom. Sienna is Anthony's partner. She is an opera singer. She is an artist of the time, and as you know, a lot of women who pursued acting or singing or performing in any type of capacity, they were usually from lower class, and they usually had to make their way whichever way they could to continue working on their craft, to continue being performers. In the back of one of the shots in Bridgerton, I am going to insert this shot in the visual version of the podcast, but it's not necessary for you to see it to understand. There is a painting in the back of Sienna's bedroom where you can see that it's a woman. This is a painting that is done by a Rococo artist, Rosalba Carriera. She is one of the most renowned female Rococo painters. She's credited by many people as the person who popularized the use of pastels in main artworks, because before pastels were used mostly for sketching and for study, like little studies that people were doing. It wasn't that popular to use pastels for the final product, the actual painting. So she brought a lot of distinction to the pastel portraiture. She's definitely one of the most successful women of her time in terms of making money and being even allowed into art circles, because obviously, as you all know, it was incredibly hard to get a place in art society as a woman, even if you were a person of great privilege in terms of being from a wealthy family or being from a white aristocratic family. It was practically impossible to get to the level that Rosalba was at in terms of being taken seriously or in terms of having a lot of orders, a lot of patrons. So I think that it's really interesting to look at her work, her portraiture, but also look at her miniature portraiture that she's done in a bunch of snuff boxes. Snuff was this type of tobacco that was snorted at the time, and it was quite popular, and usually people had like a little decorative box to store snuff in. That's actually how she got to where she was. She started painting this little paintings in the boxes when snuff was incredibly popular and everyone wanted a little box with a painting in it. So she kind of made her money at first doing that. And it's really interesting to look at this work. I think that if you are someone who smokes or does anything like that, get yourself a nice little Rococo box or paint it yourself or something like that, because it looks cute as hell. I think that it makes a lot of sense that someone like Sienna would have Rosalba Carriera's painting in the background. I think that Sienna and Madame Delacroix, both of them are the business women of the show. They're the ones who are making their own way in the world. Of course, also there is Lady Whistledown, but in the first season, we don't know who Lady Whistledown is yet, so it makes a lot of sense to focus on Sienna and Madame Delacroix. Both of them would be fitting in terms of having this painting in the background. It would make sense that they would be supporting a female artist. It would make sense that they would have someone who is a professional painter in a very male-dominated field to have her work in their home. I think that it was a really nice touch from the perspective of set design, that the set designers of the show decided to put this painting in Sienna's room. It's kind of a bit of a foreshadowing as to what Sienna is going to choose, and instead of choosing Anthony and giving up her life of opera and art that's not considered to be proper for a lady to participate in, she decides to choose the arts. It's really interesting to see this type of details in shows. I really appreciate when that happens, not only because it gives me a lot of ways of connecting popular culture and fine art and then talk about it on the podcast, but just because I personally enjoy seeing those details. Now, I do want to talk about Rococo art in terms of what it actually is, because as someone who specializes more in modern art rather than arts that came before 1756, I think, to me, Baroque and Rococo styles seemed like one and the same. Mostly because I never looked at Baroque or Rococo paintings for a really long time, especially in context. I've only seen them separated from where and when and by whom they were painted. And I think that now that I've looked into it and looked more into the context of the things that surrounded those works, I can talk about Baroque and Rococo in terms of how they are different. And I think that that would be more useful to most people who don't really specialize in those periods of time, or people who don't know a lot about specifics of the arts, or people who don't know much about the arts in general. I think that talking about the differences between the two would be more interesting than just talking about one or the other and when they started, when they ended, which artists were the most influential. So I think the main way you could differentiate Baroque and Rococo styles is by looking at the themes that are presented in the paintings. Oftentimes with Baroque you see a lot of religious scenes, and in many ways you can see Baroque style as somewhat of a propaganda style for the church, for the Catholic Church. A lot of the paintings were ordered by the church, and a lot of the time the point of painting them was to inspire people to follow this specific religion by seeing these incredibly powerful images with really intense movement in them. I think that a lot of Baroque art is trying to be incredibly dramatic and grand. The things that you're going to notice in Baroque is that there's a lot of leaning in the paintings, like the figures in the painting, they're always leaning. Usually the leaning is when they're standing up, so they're walking somewhere or they're reaching somewhere. If there's no diagonal lines involved, you get this central piece that everything else kind of surrounds and fans out. Usually the light is really dramatic too. You get really, really darks and really, really light lights. There's incredible contrast in the paintings. Usually one of the figures is highlighted literally with all the lighter shades, and a bunch of other figures that are done in colors that complement that central figure. It's basically very big and dramatic and always super religious, and it has all of that, over the top type of aesthetic that Catholic churches are known for. And when you look at Rococo style, it came at the end of Baroque, and technically it's kind of part of it, right? It's definitely similar to Baroque in some ways. For example, it's focus on beautiful imagery. It's focus on ornamental imagery. There's so many different types of details in these paintings that make it super ornamental. You either have a lot of ornaments in the painting, or you have it in the frames or in architecture, because Baroque architecture also has a lot of this wiggles and a lot of different types of curls everywhere. You get a lot of busy type of imagery. It's not random. It has a lot of perfect geometry involved, but it's still very busy. Both of these art movements are definitely beautiful in terms of the depiction of the image, and it's representational in many ways. Of course, all of the religious imagery, you can't really say whether it's real or not, let's say that way, but it depicts bodies in a realistic way. It's not abstract art. It's not a installation art piece where you might be inspired by the way it is grand and the way that it envelops you, but it's not about depicting real bodies, right? So definitely both Rococo and Baroque have realistic portrayal of life in them. Rococo is definitely more private and usually smaller in scale. Usually Rococo paintings are whimsical and they have this, what is considered to be traditionally feminine qualities. They're more about the private, they're all about decorating the personal space. That's usually what people describe Baroque and Rococo as. Baroque is quite masculine, Rococo is more feminine. Of course, if you're not a fan of using masculine and feminine as descriptors, you're probably not gonna like going about differentiating these two art movements by using masculine and feminine, but you can always use words like private and public, grand and intimate to describe them or contrast them. Another thing you're going to notice in the Rococo art is that the light is kind of washing over the entire image. It is not focused on only one spot in the painting. The paintings are usually filled with light everywhere. It has a bit of a more natural feel, and it's not as dramatic as much as it is focusing on the romantic, the erotic, and usually secular things. You won't see a Rococo painting about a religious story, you know. You're only gonna see secular paintings. You're gonna see a lot of people just chilling, a lot of aristocracy having their own life. The Baroque paintings were usually ordered by the church, and the Rococo paintings were usually ordered by individuals. You're definitely gonna notice all of those things when you look at those paintings. Of course, there are some artists who were considered to be Baroque artists who have some Rococo paintings and other way around and whatever. Art is always like that. There's no harsh lines between what kind of artist someone is. Usually there is some blending going on, especially if they were practicing their art in the transitional periods, or if they were more adventurous than some artists. You're also going to see a lot of beautiful clothes in Rococo paintings. Of course, there are a lot of beautiful clothes in Baroque paintings, but Baroque paintings are all about making you feel like you're looking at something really grand, where with Rococo it's kind of just beautiful. So you're gonna get a lot of nice fabrics that just look pretty. They don't look like it's a robe of some god, you know, but rather that it's just one of those dresses that you would really want for yourself. An example of a Rococo painting that I want to talk about, because I think it leads to a very interesting conversation, is this painting that is called The Swing by Jean-Honoré Fragonard. I don't know, man. My French is real bad. And he depicted this scene of a girl on a swing. She's a bit lower than the perfect middle of the painting, but she's definitely the focal point of the painting. She is done in a lot of light pastel colors. Your eye is drawn to her. This painting was done for a private patron, and it depicts basically just this frivolous pre-revolutionary France for aristocracy, because obviously France wasn't that good for everyone before the revolution, or every French person. And this image definitely has this lush feeling about it because it is surrounded with greenery, and the dress of the girl in the middle is really full and definitely looks like the fabric is a really expensive fabric. The guy on the left that's lying down on the ground, apparently he's like supposed to be looking up her skirt or whatever. God knows, sure, probably. And there's a shoe that's flying off of her foot to show this kind of free, opulent, happy scene. And of course, looking at this, you think about, I guess some people don't think about that, so I'm not gonna assume or say that everyone thinks about that, but with a lot of very opulent images, especially of secular life, you start to think about the percentages of people who were peasants and people who were in the aristocracy. You know all of these numbers nowadays, and you know what happened afterwards. And from this vantage point, of course, looking back at this time, you think about who was in the painting, who painted it, and who could see it, who could look at it. Because this painting was definitely not available to people to just go and see. It's not a painting that was in the church, and it's also not something that peasants even had time for because they were busy just surviving. I think that this painting naturally leads to the conversation of who had to sacrifice what for the people in this painting to have this type of opulent moment, this happy moment. And I think that this artist, Yinka Shonibare, this artist has created a 3D version of this painting. Not everything that was in the painting, mostly just the girl in the swing and some greenery around her. This sculpture or installation art piece, I guess it's more of a sculpture, portrays the girl as someone who doesn't have a head. She is beheaded. And of course, immediately when you see that, you think about French aristocracy and public beheadings that happened in 1790s or around that time. You think about the guillotines and stuff like that. And of course, that immediately brings the question of class into the conversation. The artist also used a dress that is in the aristocratic style, in the, it's tailored in the way that French dresses were tailored at the time. It's basically tailored in the same way as the dress is tailored in the painting, but he used different materials, different fabrics to create it. The pattern is definitely extremely different. It's a lot brighter, a lot more saturated. The patterns are apparently patterns that the artist saw around himself when he was growing up. These patterns are associated with African fabrics. They are apparently the origin of them is a bit more complicated. There's a lot of different types of countries that were involved in the making of them, and it's not really a traditional African pattern, but more of a pattern that was adapted later and popularized later. But that's kind of the point that the artist is trying to make. He was talking about different types of materials that have this relationship to multiple places in the world, that question of authenticity, where something originates from, and how murky it gets when time passes and a lot of people get involved in the production of things because of globalization, because of, back then, imperialism. It's still a thing nowadays, but that's a conversation for another day. Basically, this painting immediately brings a lot of conversations forward about who is in which position in society nowadays, and how we relate to our past and how much we repeat the past. Because when we think about this opulent image from 1700s, we can think about a painting or a photograph or a film that's about filthy rich people of our times and think about how would we react to it, right? Because the thing is, the painting wasn't really seen by the lower classes back then, but nowadays we do see the incredible overspending and the lush backgrounds that the 1% have in their daily lives, as well as we know about the filthy rich and how they get filthy rich, and it definitely changes the context because we are able to see these things. It's also interesting to talk about the fact that there are a lot of shows and a lot of movies that do portray this incredibly lavish lifestyle, and people who hoard wealth that they don't even need because they can't possibly spend it in their lifetime. And these shows get a lot of attention. They get fan bases. They definitely get a lot of people watching. Like, for example, Gossip Girl is an example of that. They are not as rich as some people, I guess, but they still are kind of the class that we're talking about. And it's really interesting to think about the fact that these shows portray these people, and we're kind of taught to sympathize with them and to see them as, even though morally dubious in some situations, but still good. Let me know what you think about this particular part of the conversation about our media and the way that the rich are portrayed in it now, them knowing that we actually do have access to seeing them and to knowing how much they have acquired by exploiting others. In any case, both of these works are interesting to look at, and it's especially interesting to look at Yinka's work. And there is a quote that I want to read for you from Yinka Shonibare, which is about how a simple act of leisure can be so controversial. He says, "While the leisure pursuit might look frivolous, my depiction of it is a way of engaging in that power. It is actually an expression of something much more profoundly serious insofar as the accumulation of wealth and power that is personified in leisure was no doubt a product of exploiting people." So these are the things that I wanted to talk about. A bit of Baroque, some Rococo, Rosalba, Carriera, Fragonard, and Yinka Shonibare. So let's talk about Bridgerton a little bit more.
Will I be nervous if I'm chosen to be on the show? No. Why should I be? I am extremely comfortable being on national television.
So I rewatched season 2 once again. I am definitely enjoying the second season a lot. I choose to not see season 1. I choose to pretend that it does not exist. Of course, I developed a bit of a crush on both Anthony and Kate, because who wouldn't? I told my grandma about it, and she's like a really, really big fan of Pride and Prejudice, and she, out of all the films that she watched and all the books that she's read that are about, the period pieces, basically from different types of periods, she likes to read those things, but she only rewatches or rereads Pride and Prejudice. My grandma, my 84-year-old grandma, liked the second season of the show, and said that she was going to rewatch it in the future, that it's one of those things that she's actually going to be rewatching the same way as she rewatches Pride and Prejudice, specifically the 95 version, the 6-episode show. Watching Bridgerton sent me on a rewatching path of all of those period movies and period shows like Pride and Prejudice, the 6 episodes from 95, and then also the movie from 2005. I very much enjoyed rewatching that. I think that a lot of the time I enjoy not the time that it's set in, not the customs, but I really enjoy stories they're quite rare, but stories where there are two equally interesting characters with flawed personalities that are flawed in a respectable way. They have integrity. Having two characters that have integrity interacting with each other and developing feelings for each other over a long period of time because they have misunderstood one another, or because they kind of did not have an interest in each other at first and then developed that interest in whatever. That is definitely my type of content. And then yesterday I rewatched Little Women, the one that Greta Gerwig made. I really enjoyed that movie, actually, even though it is a little bit confusing to watch as someone who hasn't read Little Women. because it jumps so much in terms of timeline, it's really difficult to actually catch everything. However, I do think that it's really interesting that she decided to show the ending that the author wrote in the book, and then show the not literal ending of her life, of the writer's life, but I guess a different alternative ending where the author gets her book made. And it's definitely a movie that shows you the real life of the author, because I believe that it's autobiographical to some extent, and it also shows the life of the fictional character Joe. And I think that this movie is definitely has a lot of representation for ace people, because I do believe that Joe is probably an ace character, especially in the movie. Let me know what you think about that, if you agree with it or not. But if not ace, but something along the lines of that. And I think that it opens up a really interesting conversation about culture and things like, for example, the fact that I enjoy these movies or these stories is kind of interconnected with the fact that I do not understand or like Western hookup culture. I don't quite get it, to be honest, because there's a lot that I have to say about this in general, but I kind of feel like a lot of these new ways that we have to identify our sexualities to kind of give ourselves space to get to know other people is really interesting, because I do not quite understand how it's possible that someone can have feelings for someone, or feelings, by feelings I mean attraction, not actual like feelings, but I don't understand how people can have attraction to somebody who they don't know and don't like because they don't know them. And I think that it's really interesting that in the West it's considered to be something that you have to define to other people, especially people that you are considering as partners or as someone who you would want to get to know in a romantic way, and how it is kind of assumed to be normal in the East. Maybe that's not the global East, I guess, but just not North America. North America is very much hookup culture driven. And I think that we should talk about how there's so little space given to people to actually participate in relationships more consciously, because for some reason the norm nowadays and the normal sexuality or libido is considered to be the one that is extremely heightened, or the one that includes attraction from first sight. Just a topic of conversation that I think we should have because it's interesting. Tell me in the comments below what you think about it, because I want to continue this conversation through the podcast. We can have another, section where we talk about it in the next podcast. I just want to hear what you guys think about it, because I also saw someone tweeting about it recently and I thought, oh, finally people are starting to talk about this. But specifically the fact that you have to kind of constantly tell people that you are either on the gray scale or you're demisexual or whatever, regardless of whether you actually know that you are or not, just because you need space from people or from strangers and stuff like that. It's just really interesting to me that this is kind of the thing that's happening, where in other places in the world you don't really have to define that, because everyone just assumes that you can't really be attracted to someone you don't know and someone who's technically a stranger to you. Basically, let me know what you think about it. It's a really interesting topic. I also find amatonormativity a really interesting topic as well. I'm going to leave a link in the description to Tara Mooney's video about amatonormativity, because I think that it's really interesting to watch. There's also another YouTuber in the video who is Ace, who talks about Little Women and how Joe is kind of like Ace representation in many ways, and I think that it's really interesting to watch and talk about it. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about today is music. I want to just tell you about new music that you should check out.
What? Are they insane? How are we supposed to survive without any tunes?
So, there's been a couple of releases that I haven't talked about. They're quite recent. Maybe there's been like 2 weeks or 3 weeks since they released. I don't know, man. Time is a joke to me at this point. But Rosalia's Motomami, I like it. I know that a lot of people were kind of pissed about the lyrics because they're not like deep or whatever. I think that this is an experimental album that just uses a bunch of sounds and a bunch of different techniques. She's just trying things out, and I do enjoy some of the songs a lot. For example, Saoko is great, Diablo is great, Cute is also really great. That middle part where she's singing is fantastic. Candy is also really fun. I think that you should check them out. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you listen to Rosalia in general. I do. I really like her since first album. I know that her first album was more like an essay, and then this one is just a collection of songs, so I don't really compare them because I don't think that she intended them to be similar or intended this second record to be like a sophomore record. It's more like an experimental kind of mix bag, and I think that it's still fun to listen to and explore different types of sounds, and just listen to her voice. She's got a great voice. Another album is Charli XCX Crush. It sounds quite different to what she usually releases. At least it's different from the style that she's created with Sophie, but I still like a few songs from the album. To be honest, each one of Charli's albums, I like a few songs. I don't like the entire album like some people do, you know? Or maybe I just don't listen to it in the right mood to get into all of them. But for Crush, I really liked Baby, I liked Lightning, I like Yuck, and I like Every Rule. Check them out, they're really fun to listen to as well. And another song / also music video I want to talk about is this song by Taeyong from NCT and a guy named Weinstein. The song is called Love Theory, and it's honestly just like really easy to listen to pop tune, but I really liked that in the chorus the line goes, "You are my lovely fairy." And I thought, this is for us ladies, this is for us, for the people from this little community that's been built around my channel. This fairy shit is just like the foundation of what I'm doing here. Obviously, I understand that this is what it comes off as, and I understand that this is basically just, it's been made for us. Just check it out because I think that it's really cute and it was written personally for us. So I think we should check it out collectively. And I think another thing that I liked was also this group, IVE, their song Love Dive. I really like the music video. I think that you should check out the music video. It is really cute, has a lot of good CGI, and the set design is really interesting. I really enjoyed that. The song is great too. I know that for some people it might not click from the first listen, but it's definitely one of those songs that kind of are very poppy, but they have this melancholy undertone going on, and it is because I don't know if the entire song is in minor key, but I do know that the background vocals in the chorus are in minor, and it just has this feeling of wistfulness and a little bit of melancholy. I think that you're gonna enjoy it if you like pop music and you enjoy a little bit of K-pop or a little bit of I guess no, it's not really hyper pop, but they definitely have a very catchy choreography going with it. Check it out if you enjoy things like that. That is all for today. I'd love to hear more from you. Let me know if you have any art questions or any questions in general, and I will see you next time on this podcast. Bye!